Hi, I'm Bobby Halton, and I work for Fire Engineering Magazine, Fire Apparatus Magazine, Fire Rescue Magazine, and FDIC. Um, Today is a Google Hangout, so it's Wednesday. We appreciate you joining us. Today is the first installment of the 2015 Google Hangout schedule, and today is the Fireground. Going forward, I won't be your primary host anymore. Myself and Eric Roden are going to step back a little bit and let our new hosts, who have much more gravitas, pedigrees, and experience than myself, take over. So hosting the Fireground going forward is going to be my good friend Mike Dugan, and accompanying Mike is going to be my other good friend Bill Guston. Today, Mike will be hosting pretty much by himself. I'll be backing him up a little bit, but Mike will be hosting by himself because Bill is actually in school today renewing his EMT license. And we all know how important it is to the safety and survivability of people in southern Florida that Bill Guston is a trained EMT. It's almost ironic. But anyway, going forward, the first Wednesday rather of every month will be training, and our hosts there are Steve Pegram and Aaron Heller. The second Wednesday of every month is going to be the Fireground with Bill Guston and Mike Dugan. The third Wednesday is going to be Chief Rick Lasky doing issues and concerns. The fourth Wednesday of every month is going to be health and safety, and that will be Frank Ritchie and PJ Norwood. If there's a fifth Wednesday, we might do a special edition. We'll play that by ear, or we may just rest and give you all a break. But today we've got Mike Dugan, we've got Chris Costamagna, who's out in Sacramento, may have a little problem logging in. I don't know if Chris has joined us yet. Dan Shaw, who you all know, very familiar with Dan, and Chief Mike Gilbert, who will be joining us from down in Florida if he can. He's got some issues he was dealing with also. So that's how it's going to go into the future. That's the new model we have. Remember, if you want to send a question about the Fireground today to myself and Mike, just use hashtag FETalk. Do I got that right, Brandon? Is it hashtag FETalk? I'm correct in that, I'm assuming. So hashtag FETalk, and that'll get your question right to us via Twitter, and we can read it online. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the man of the hour, the new host going forward for your second Wednesday of the month, Captain Mike Dugan, formerly of the FDNY and now officially retired and out there training and teaching the American Fire Service how to be more effective, more efficient, and safer. Mike, take it away.
Thank you very much, Bobby. I appreciate the opportunity to do this. I appreciate working for you, and I appreciate Fire Engineering and FDIC and Fire Apparatus letting us do this. We're going to start today. We're going to talk a little bit about SOGs, SOPs, whatever you want to call them, on the Fireground. And we're going to talk about the way we are doing this, because the whole idea of this is to have a plan on the Fireground. You have to have something that you can go to when things start going down. I think the FDNY does a real good job of doing the Fireground SOGs. They base them on the building types. We're going to talk to different people from around the country. Hopefully our friends who are out there can join us and get on. There have been, unfortunately, a couple of issues with people getting in front of the computer today. But we are going to talk to Dan. We're going to talk about some of the things that are going on in the fire service and how these SOGs are going to be so important to us. What they are is they're the game plan, because we know if we don't show up to the fire with a plan, we don't show up with an idea of how we're going to do things, we're going to have a problem. So we'll start off with talking to Dan. Dan, I know you work in Fairfax County, and I know you're doing a lot of training there and everything else. How are your SOGs put together?
So very simply, the way it works for us is, many years ago, some of our great fire service leaders within Fairfax recognized the need, and September 11th really brought really the focus back to it, because obviously with the attack on the Pentagon, that brought together a lot of agencies, because the Pentagon obviously sits in Northern Virginia. So I brought all of our agencies together and really demonstrated we had a strong need to have this seamless amount of operation between all our agencies. our basic training was all along the same lines, but how do we bring our operations all together? So they had put together essentially a collective group representing those Northern Virginia fire departments and said, all right, we're going to set forth these operational manuals. So whether you call it SOGs, SOPs, a lot of that for us goes back to the administrative side. We run by our operations manuals. So instead of reinventing the wheel, we looked at what you guys had in the FDNY, some other urban jurisdictions, and saw, hey, you already have a manual for the occupancy types. How about we just see the template they have and then integrate what we have in Northern Virginia? And you and I were talking about before we went on air is the struggle we have and the challenge we have to overcome is that Fairfax is 1.2 million people jammed into 400 square miles. But underneath that same umbrella of the Nova region are places that have, where Kyle Wilson unfortunately has line of duty death. And Prince William is pretty rural area. It's going to be a while before they get a full box alarm to show up. It's going to be a while before they get 20, 30, 40 people there. Whereas every day I go work as a battalion chief, I'm almost guaranteed in 6 minutes I'll have 40 to 50 guys on the fire ground ready to go work operating seamlessly. So for us, what those operational manuals did and how we orchestrate that to work out is that it brings it, much like you alluded to, it brings order to the chaos on the fire ground. So that we can take all these items that we look at on the fire ground that lead to line of duty deaths and close calls and unsuccessful outcomes, and we can take care of a lot of those variables by having a orchestrated pattern that's going to happen, and with directives on. I'll use a basement fire, the perfect example. Everyone knows what they're going to do on a basement fire in a single-family dwelling or a townhouse or row home in Northern Virginia. We know where the first line's going, we know where the second line's going, we know where the third line's going, and they communicate that. And that didn't happen by chance. That happened by having that organization in place to say, all right, you get the recognition of a basement fire, and now we can, the tactics are already kind of laid out for you. We gave you a blueprint. You adjust as you see necessary because of the dynamic place we go to called the fire ground. But now we've taken that off your plate, so you can focus solely on the fire at hand and not, well, where do I want to take this line? Where's the truck going to go? Where's the rescue going to go? That's already kind of taken care of, so we can put the focus back to the company officer to focus on the fire at hand and take away some of that extraneous stuff that allows them to focus on that. And that's where we see that cascading, failures that happen on the fire ground are usually basic fundamental skills that lead to line of duty death. So if we can take a lot of that stuff out by having an organization, having the structure, that blueprint for the fire ground, it's a win-win for us. And we've seen really, there's some speed bumps and curves to it, but it's been nothing but success for us.
I think that's great. And I think there are a couple of things. I like your term, order to the fire ground. Bringing order to the fire ground by having these SOGs in place, because we all know the fire ground can be a very, very chaotic situation. And the other thing, it allows for adjustments in these SOGs. You have to allow for adjustments. And the adjustments have to be made when there is a safety issue, there is another issue on the fire ground. And I think it's real important that we are aware of this. If any adjustment is made in those SOGs, the important part about that is it has to be communicated up the chain of command to the person in charge, whoever the IC is, and they have to know that we've made an adjustment because of something that we have found in there. And I think the idea of having this SOG makes us so much safer, and I think it's really, really, really an important point of it. And as you brought up basement fires, you know where you're going. Basement fires, anybody who likes basement fires is either lying to you or a complete idiot. Okay, basement fires they stink. Okay, there's nothing worse than trying to go down, and I've gone down those stairs quite a few times, and I have friends who have been put out of the job, burnt in that chimney, and had parts of their body horrifically burnt, scarred forever, or whatever else. So I think it's an important thing, and because we're talking about basement fires, we have Chief Costamagna, Chris Costamagna from Sacramento, joining us, and I know he had a recent incident with a basement fire. Chris, how are you, brother?
Good, Mike. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Now, what happened with you the other day?
What we had the other day was the community basically Victorians that a lot of them don't have basements, but there's one street in 60 avenues that has a bunch of basements on it. The guys went there, fire showed up in the kitchen when they got there, and they had no signs that there's a basement in this building. The guys made entry to push in with the initial attack line, and the floor gave way within 10 feet of the front door. So immediately we had two guys downstairs in the basement. The nozzleman was back up, and he went into a rescue mode right away. And we fell back on the SOGs, as we were talking about earlier, and had to make adjustments right away. Now, I wasn't there. I wasn't one of the first arriving time chiefs. I was late in the arrival as far as the time chiefs go. But they were able to make rapid adjustments. And actually, the crew themselves, being a well-trained crew, they went into a rapid intervention mode where they were rescuing their own right away. The captain did something that he's worked in a district where they have basement fires a lot. There's a lot of basements. He always brings a folding ladder to the front door, and they're able to get the folding ladder in the basement right away, get the firefighter who was burned pretty bad. He's still in the hospital today. He's doing surgeries today, but he was able to get. They were able to get him on the ladder. The backup fireman was able to help get him up the ladder with the captain, and then back up into the first floor and out of the building. So I agree with you. Anybody that likes basement fires is a sick individual. So whether you're going down the stairs to try and get to the floor, you're on the collapse like we did. They don't always go. I haven't seen one of those movies yet.
No, they don't always go well, and we were very, very lucky in your case that the brothers had the proper tools, had the knowledge, you had a well-trained crew, and they understood their SOGs, and they understood their duties and responsibilities. And we went from a basement fire to a life hazard because we had a couple of firefighters trapped in the basement, and they were able to make their move and get them out. So I think, again, having the right set of guidelines, the right set of the playbook, the right plays, makes it a winning hand, makes it a winning game. So I think that we have to, on these SOGs, we have to have them in place. I mean, I still go places and I say, what do you guys do for RIT? And they say, we don't do RIT. And you wonder, what are we thinking? And, you know, what are your plans? Do you differentiate between the local fast food restaurant and a single-family home? If you don't differentiate between a Home Depot and a one-family occupied private dwelling, you're going to have a problem. So we need to have our SOGs based on our response area. It has to be based on the manning. And as far as I'm concerned, with the manning, it has to be based on the minimum staffing that your department or company will let that apparatus roll with. There are places that still roll with 2 people. If that's the case, okay, we have to start with that number and work our way up from there. But it doesn't matter what your plan is, as long as everybody is on the same page on that fire ground. I don't care if your department's idea of fighting a fire is going to be to throw snowballs through the broken window. If that's the case, that's fine. Then you better have a refrigerated truck full of snowballs in July and August where you can throw them through the windows. It doesn't matter. But what matters is that everyone is doing the same thing. If you're throwing snowballs through a window, you better not have anybody making an interior push into that building. We all have to be on the same page. And that's, I think, where the SOGs are so important, that the department adopts them and that everybody understands them and knows about them.
I think a couple of things that went well for us that day were not having the SOGs in place and everybody understanding them and practicing from the same playbook. That's the common platform we start from. The backup team that was there, they didn't push in on top of the guys until they knew they needed help, and that's a big problem, and was a big problem in our agency. I've seen in other agencies. They had two guys on the backup line that didn't come inside. They actually had to hold the fire in check while the rescue was affected. And then the other thing that I wanted to touch bases on, Mike, with SOGs is that they build from simple to complex. So the fires that we run the most are single-family dwelling fires. The tactics that we employ there, we build on those tactics when we go to commercial and high-rise. So it's not, so the place we used to practice the most is on a single-family dwelling fire. And it's not a novel event when you go to a high-rise fire, which you might go to a lot. And the guidelines all play to that. All help us stick to that. Larger.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very valuable point. The FDNY built their SOGs. They started with lattice 3, the basic lattice bulletin tenements, with what we were going through all the time, and everything was based on lattice 3. We based the engine company operations on the basic engine company operation, and then we evolved. We went to private dwellings. We went to multiple dwellings, but the situations are still the same. And the amazing thing that I think about a lot of departments that do good firefighting with an SOG in place is that the people know, they pull up in front of a building and they can look and say, this is a high-rise multiple dwelling, this is a multiple dwelling, this is a private dwelling. I know where I'm going to go based on this building type. This is a large commercial. I know where I'm going to go. I know what's going to happen. If I'm going to a high-rise fire in a high-rise commercial office building, I am not splitting my crew. If I'm going to a high-rise residential, I'm splitting my crew. So we know where these things are taking us based on the buildings that we pull up in front of, and everyone should be able to start sizing those buildings up. I'm not asking one of your brand new members, a Proby, somebody else to know. The ones that really kind of can come and bite us and give us a problem would be the ones where we have the either a hybrid or a mixed-use building where they've changed some of the occupancies and things like that. And that can be one where you think you're going to a single-family private dwelling and they've broken it up into a rooming house. Or you think you're going to a commercial, but they have people living above the commercial. So those are some of the things that can come back and bite us.
And Mike, if I can add something to what you're saying, is we had the same struggle, and that's when a lot of times people will look at it and say, all right, well, we have this operations manual, and I can't deviate from it. And that's the furthest thing from the truth, is it really what we're, if you break it down to the bare bones, I mean, a lot of our manuals are written for someone who probably is devoid of common sense, can walk up with no background in the fire service and say, wow, this is how they're going to operate on a townhouse fire. I can see, look, there's that guy going here. But it gives you the basic blueprint to say, hey, here's what it is. It's up to you as a quarterback of that operation to call the audible because you see that the fire is changing. We have SROs or whatever the case may be, and this is a little bit different. But at a minimum, everyone knows, all right, if I'm a first arriving engine, this is what I have to do. For us, the fourth engine on every occupancy type is the RIC. It is, they know it. Now, when we first started doing it years ago, guys would be like, oh, I'm not fourth, I'm third. I don't want to do RIC. But now they know. And they know they're fourth, they walk up. And a perfect example for us is, when we had that double blizzard a couple years back, we had some guys in a garden apartment fire that one of the guys got blown off the floor balcony, fortunately landed in about 30 inches of snow, and we had one other guy trapped in the apartment. Well, we always plan for, RIT. We have this idea that you're going to formulate your RIT, have a game plan, build this cache of equipment, and we'll come together, we'll have a big meeting, and then the fire gods will arrange the Mayday to occur because we're now prepared. That doesn't happen. And what happened on this incident was that from 2 minutes and 17 seconds from the minute they hit the on-scene button, Mayday occurred. And you're not going to have success unless we have conditioned that through the operations manuals, through the training, and driven it home that you're fourth. It's not a surprise when you got there. You know you're going to be RIT. So you already have the game plan. You've already built the template through your training for the previous year that, hey, when we are that fourth engine, this is what we're going to do every single time. So that when you hear it, you can execute. And you're not doing anything else other than executing the plan you've worked out because of that template that's been provided to you. And I think, the secret with these a lot of our operations manuals, and this is what we really aim for, is that what's sorely missing in our generation of fire service nowadays is answering the why. Why do we do this? Why do we carry this? And for us, like our engine company manual was an opportunity to answer the why about what a nozzleman does, what a backup man does, what is the intricacies of that your body position when you're advancing a hose line. But then you're also, just through a template of a document, you're driving the culture that you expect of your organization. I know I think the same for FDNY, I'm not sure for other organizations, but our operations manuals are the foundation of your promotional exams. So if we're saying this is what we want, this is the expectation for success on the fire ground, this is the culture we want of our firefighters, and we put it into the testing, then we're almost guaranteeing that you're going to read this book, you're going to be held accountable to it when you're on the fire ground, and now we can have that human leadership part put into the equation, and bam, and now you've driven the culture you wanted in the fire service, and it kind of started with the simple formation of an operational manual or SOG about how we're going to operate on the fire ground.
And I think that's so important, because what it does is it also allows us to train on you come into FDNY as a program, and they give you the books, and they say, here, this is what you're going to study. And you go into the firehouse, and you're going to salt and pepper notebook, and you're supposed to read. You have a reading schedule. What you have to read the SOGs for the FDNY and understand them. If you're assigned to a truck company, you have to start with the truck company stuff. If you're assigned to an engine company, you have to start with the engine company stuff. And you have to read these and know these, and this is how we train you. And this makes it so much easier for us, because if you have a question reading the books, you can ask your officers.
Yeah. I think, the other side of conversely, and this is one of the things we kind of struggle with, is we have a lot of operational manuals. I mean, we go outside the occupancy type. We have ones for metro incidents and things of that nature. And so when you have a brand new member who comes in, they have these just endless streams of information coming into them, and they don't have the experience, and maybe they're a little hesitant to reach out to a mentor to say, where do I start? So I don't know if other organizations have this, but this is one of the models we're kind of looking at, is adopting much like what the military does. Your reading is based upon your rank. So do I need a probationary firefighter to read the 150 pages of the command officer's manual? No, but he probably should know what divisions and groups are. Do I need a lieutenant and a captain to know that? Absolutely. So trying to take all the information that you're putting together, because these are legacy documents. You're setting the tone for the next generation, and hopefully you have a process to continually review these and adopt them to the modern environment. But you're leaving a legacy about how it works. And it's best if you have it tiered so that all those people who are going through the ranks are reading it, and it's pertinent to the job they're doing every single day.
Yeah, I think so. And I think having the documents, we assign our probies an in-firehouse. When you get assigned to the firehouse, you get an in-firehouse reading schedule. And that reading schedule is based on whether you're in an engine company or a truck company, and it starts right down the line as to where you're going to go and what you're going to read. And then you take a mark in a book, in your notebook, about what you read, and then the officer's supposed to come in and review your notebook with you and read it, and he signs it in red, so he knows that you've been reading, and he knows what you're going over. And some of the guys, I mean, it's amazing. You can tell who was a penmanship expert and who is an artist and everything else. Some of these guys can draw pictures that would make you it's amazing, some of the stuff you see, but it really works very, very well for us.
Mike, a couple things I wanted to springboard off of that Dan was talking about. That initial assignment the other day, the first 20 minutes, was what we talked about to our guys that are in the officers general school for all we have is captains. So when they go through their captain's academy, we talk to them about how, I'm backing up a little bit, Dan, but we talked to them about how Rick is handled by the company's on scene on the first line assignment. So you always have to be ready for it. And you have to be ready to react and react appropriately. What we saw the other day, it was a few outcomes, a really bad scenario. Those companies reacted appropriately. They didn't wait for a rig company to come in and start life-saving effort. 'Cause, you know, two guys in the basement and one guy hung up, sliding into the basement. So that's something we try and hammer home. And the other thing that I was going to talk to or speak at that Dan was talking about is when you have these SOGs, managers and followers and managers, a couple of things. It's our job as fireground operators and chief officers to hold people accountable to the SOG. And a lot of times I see guys not wanting to confront someone when they didn't do what they're supposed to. And it's not a confrontation in the street. It's not a chest bumping thing. It's just going on the side, going around the backside of the truck and saying, hey, I need you to do this every time. Because when they don't do it, we're just deviating towards mediocrity. If they're pulling a red line on this, they're pulling this 3/4 lines, you need to pull them aside and talk to them. And it's become, I guess, with a younger generation out there or Generation Y, they want to know why. I'll take the time to explain it once, but it's in the manuals too. So I'm not going to reinforce it. And I did a lot of work on that too, reinforcing why we do things. Historically, why do the ladders a certain way? Why do we push certain lines? So it's become really important to the battalion chief's job. When people ask what a battalion chief does, that's a lot of what I do. The guys know what they're doing on the personnel side. They've studied for it, they've mastered it, they're the captain in the seat. A lot of what I'm doing is trying to get ahead of the fire and correct those openings after the fire is out. And the last thing I'll say, the Dan was starting to talk about, we have our own mode that we stole from the military, and we're all one vote away from the next guy's job. So if your battalion chief, you're really the next guy's job, captain's really the battalion chief's job, because you don't know when someone gets hurt or something happens and you're going to have to take over for that entire period of time. And that's what we're trying to convince people that they're learning. Our firefighter will get wherever their first promotion is going to be, and so on. It's really important for the fire chiefs. You can't wait till they're
I think that's a valid point, and I think it's very, very interesting because, I mean, unfortunately, there are people out there who aren't team players and don't want to play by the rules. And there are people who set up their own SOGs. Well, you know, they say we're supposed to do it this way in headquarters in the puzzle palace, but we're not going to do it this way here. We're going to do it this way. Well, everyone else on the department is doing it the way the chiefs tell you to do it, and now you're following your own rules. Well, you're not a team player then. And if you're not, as an officer, I always expected you to do what your job was. And the most important communication to me would be if your assigned job, if your task, if that job that I expected you to do could not be done, you have to communicate that to me immediately and tell me why. I remember one time I was at a building and the chief told me to go around the rear and ladder the second floor. I went around the rear and I said, Chief, I really can't ladder the second floor. And the chief looked at me like I had two heads. He goes, are you friggin' kidding me? Why can't you throw a ladder to the back of this building in a second? I said, well, it's a little bit of a problem in the back. And the chief says, do I have to come back there and show you what to do? And he walks back with me. Well, they had dug out a 20 wide by 40 deep. They were going to add an addition on the building. And it was mud. There was one fireman down in there already, and he was stuck to his waist in the mud. Oh. And we were trying to tie a rope on him to get him out, and the chief's like, I guess we can't ladder the rear of the building. Okay, I got it now. But, you know, as soon as you said you can't do it, he's like, this is so easy. Well, no, it's not. But he didn't understand what we had seen in the back. And I probably didn't communicate it quickly enough to him for his pleasure, but that's okay. I learned a lot about that. It's just, we have to make sure that we understand the tasks that are required of the company, the individuals, and make sure that we follow through on those tasks. And if not, we have to communicate. Chief Alton, what do you think about this? Because I would like your input as a chief.
Well, I think there are several really good points that came out that I hope the folks that are listening today are taking notes as I was. Um, Always, when we write an SOG or an SOP or whatever you want to call it, you have to remember that, as Chris was talking about his fire the other day, the buildings and the fire don't always play according to our mindset. Our mindset is written for a fire, a standard fire, if you will. And I know every fire's got its unique characteristics, but we do have some standard expectations. I think Dan spoke to that very well about for our younger firefighters, those who are maybe firefighters or chauffeurs, probably there should be reading that's specific to them that is more focused on what they have to do in those standard environments. But just like the football analogy that Dan used, I thought it was very well stated, that occasionally you're going to run a pattern. The pocket could collapse on the quarterback. He's scrambling, so you complete your pattern. He's not ready to throw. You've got to improvise. Now, when that happens, sometimes that requires an exception report, like Mike just mentioned. If you can't complete a task, or it's going to take longer, or you're going to need additional resources, that needs to be communicated. Sometimes it can be anticipated. In other words, you're doing a stretch. I watched a video the other day of a fire actually out in your neck of the woods, Dan, or actually it was Montgomery County's neck of the woods, and there was a great deal of critiquing going on by the beanbag crowd, as I like to call them, who have nothing better to do than throw stones at other people's fires. But they were commenting on the difficulty they were having moving lines and getting set up and attacking this particular two-story multiple family fire that they were fighting. There were a lot of audibles going on there. This was a fire that clearly was not a standard fire for these people. Their resources were limited, their information was limited, and they were having some difficulties with some operations. I think with Dan's advice about having a real simple plan for the folks at the task level, a more integrated plan for the folks at the officers level, and then a more dynamic set of reading plans for those folks at the strategic level makes great sense, especially when you look at that particular fire, or you take what Chris had to deal with the other day, two firefighters through the floor into a basement. There's task level stuff that needs to get completed quickly and effectively by frontline people. There's integration of resources and reassignment of resources that needs to happen just locally right there among those officers who are on top of that incident. And then there's a dynamic profile that the chief needs to maneuver through it. And I think that the game plan needs to be communicated ahead of time as to what we're going to do, but then people need to be able to call those audibles based upon those circumstances like Chris was speaking to with that basement fire. It's interesting because one of the questions that came across on FE hashtag FE Talk was, and this is the world we live in. What liability does an officer or a firefighter assume when they deviate from a SOP or an SOG? And I think that's an interesting question for the group. In other words, does your organization instruct you or empower you to deviate from SOPs when necessary, and is there a process in place for doing that? I thought that was an interesting question. And another question that came up that you all might like to kick around was, how often and how frequently are your SOPs and SOGs reviewed for their timeliness, I guess, is for lack of a better word. I mean, new information's coming all the time, new tools, new opportunities. I was reading about a new tool that they're messing around with in Europe now. So lots of stuff there to discuss.
I think there's a lot there to discuss, and I think the first thing is the deviation from your SOGs or SOPs. A lot of places are calling them SOGs now. they're calling them procedures now, SOPs. They got away from standard operating guidelines because guidelines are, in a legal sense, more restrictive. So they're procedures. Okay, you call them guidelines now. Guidelines are, procedures are more restrictive. Guidelines are a little more, they just guide you. And that's because we let lawyers in the fire service and people are getting sued over everything. So I think that part of the issue is how they are written. They have to take into account operational variations, and they also have to take into account the idea that if there is a reason that the officer in charge or the officer on that unit decides to deviate, that they can deviate from those standard operational guidelines to make a change because of whatever's happening in that specific situation. It has to empower them to take care of the public, firefight, and their personnel at all times, and those are going to be their three priorities. And if that requires them doing something different, that's fine, and that should be part of it. Okay. I think that's an important thing. I think having the ability to deviate is essential to them, and I think the part of that is that it has to be communicated. Anytime you're deviating from what the operational bulletins say, from what the guidelines say, whatever your department is using, anytime you deviate from the standard response for this townhouse, this commercial building, or something else, then we have to think about making sure that incident command knows, because that job isn't being covered at the time.
And if I could add to what you're saying, Mike, is I think the key words of what Chief Halton said that are the linchpin to deviating is when necessary, not arbitrarily, because I don't like what you have us doing. I don't want to be the second engine. I want to be the first. No, there's a process in place. So I mean, I think we identify as look, it's a dynamic process we go to. There is no cookie cutter fire, and that you as a company officer. And we preach this all the time, is that I can put all the strategies and tactics we want into a manual, but a manual will never teach you sound judgment. And your ability to execute sound judgment on the fire ground is why we have a company officer. So when you arrive and you deem it is necessary for me to change the game plan because I've taken a lap, I've gathered more information, I got more intelligent information from a fleeing occupant. Okay, just communicate it. That's all I need you to do. Communicate why you want to change, make sure everyone on the fire ground knows the change, and then me as the incident commander, my job is to make sure that now we have a new plan with clear expectations, executed on the fire ground. But that key word that Chief Halton said is, when necessary. Not because you don't like your assignment and not for arbitrary purposes, but when you make good sound judgment and say we need to deviate because the mission of putting water on the fire or performing this rescue can only be executed when we do this. And I think that's kind of the key to that equation.
I think it's a big key.
To tag on what Aaron was saying too, is the communication piece of it is the piece that gets left off a lot. The company officers get involved with deviating from a guideline for a good reason, but they need to communicate it as soon as they can, because the chief officer is trying to put together his next play and pull together all the information he's getting. And if guys aren't talking on the radio, this is a big problem that we see on our fire ground, is there's a lot of face-to-face communication. You got to take some time every couple minutes and update us with what's going on, or we're going to start having to reach back and get condition reports, and that starts jamming up the radio channels. Along with that is the relevancy of information that they're giving out to us, why they're deviating from the guideline, because that's going to be important to all the other people or companies as they go into their tactics and strategy in the fire ground. If the first company deviates, they've got to be very clear why they're deviating and what they're doing. All the other companies are going to probably play off of that. And a good friend of ours says, so goes the first line, so goes the fire ground. Well, if that first communication doesn't get made, we have the same kind of problems on the fire ground. things kind of stack up. People expect you to be doing something and you're not doing it. So communicate it as soon as you can. For us, it became the difference between uh, the independent action is communicated on the meeting. If it's not communicated, you're freelancing. And you're going to get called on the side of the fire engine at the end of the day. So the communication piece, I don't like to talk a ton on the radio. I listen a lot, and I coordinate when I have to. But there are the company officers out there that need to communicate, like Dan was saying, when they're making that initial deviation and why they deviate. It's very important.
It is, and again, it goes down to communication on the fire ground. I mean, one of the most vital things on the fire ground is to know what everybody's doing, especially, you know, if we go there with a good set of SOGs and we expect everybody to do this, the communication, if something is not going right, if something is going wrong, is very, very important to us. And, I mean, there are some that are just so basic now. I was talking to somebody the other day about this. The FDNY now, as soon as the receipt of an alarm, we're going to a fire and the chief is giving a report. The FDNY dispatchers will say, Chief, you're 5 minutes in. Chief, you're 8 minutes in. Chief, you're 10 minutes in. I remember in our books it used to say if you don't have significant headway on a fire in 20 minutes, that the chief should reevaluate the situation. Well, that was the fire environment of the 60s and the 70s, when we were burning a lot more natural materials and everything else. We all know now, with the UL, the NIST studies, and all of the fire behavior stuff, that 20 minutes, forget it. I mean, there'll be firemen that are gone in 20 minutes because of the progression of the fire ground. Rapid fire development now, some people are calling it. Whatever you want to use is the term, but fires are getting hotter quicker. They're going to the same temperature, but they're getting to that temperature because of the fuel load now in minutes, not segments of time, not 15, 20 minutes. They're getting there in 2, 3, 4 minutes. So I think that the important thing for us to understand is, as Bobby asked, is the updates. I mean, if your books still say we're going to go up and cut every roof, because all we had was wood roofs. Now there are gypsum deck roofs and everything else. Then it's time to sit down with a group of people in your department who are the movers and shakers and say, well, maybe we have to go over these SOGs and look at them and figure out what we are going to do. We have to look at our nozzle. We have to look at our water flow. We have to look at the capabilities. I mean, how much are we going to be able to flow out of this line? I think it does do us a lot of good to review our SOGs at least on a semi-annual basis, just to go over them and see if we have anything that we've missed. And the other thing is, if we go to a fire and something happens, we can make changes in them. If it doesn't work, we can make changes to them and say to the men and women, you know what? We thought this was going to work, but it doesn't work right now. We had a problem at this fire. John Norman, great guy, was battalion chief in the city, ended up being in charge of our Special Operations Command. But one of his famous statements was, if you're one of my officers and I find you in a McDonald's at 3 a.m. when nobody's in there fighting a fire inside the McDonald's, you're going to be looking for someplace else to work tomorrow. Because you don't risk firefighters' lives inside a vacant structure that's of a lightweight construction to save McDonald's money. It's just not worth it. So you have to know what your SOGs say and what your plan is. And if something doesn't work, you have to change it.
Well, you know, Mike, I've got a really good SOP for fast food commercial fires that we wrote in Albuquerque, and it said, if you have a fire in a McDonald's at 2 in the morning, plan A, defensive. Plan B, lunch at Wendy's.
I think that's perfect. I think that's perfect. Yes. Okay. Because who's in McDonald's at 2 o'clock in the morning?
Just the
Now,
hamburger.
just the Hamburglar. Okay. And maybe a Ronald's doll. Besides that, there's nobody in there. Now, there are fast food restaurants that are open 24, they're serving it and all that. I mean, when I was a young man, there was a Jack in the Box that was open 24 hours a day around. We used to go there on Saturday nights at like 2 o'clock in the morning because we worked at this place until 2 o'clock in the morning. We'd go sit outside there and watch people trying to talk to the clown. That was more fun than anything else in the world, okay, because it was hysterical. But if there were people in there, we're putting our gear on and we're going in together to get the people out. Once we have the life hazard removed, then we, the firefighters, are the only life hazard. And we don't belong in that building if there is a significant fire. There's a wastebasket in the bathroom that somebody set on fire. Listen, that's a deviation of the SOG. Understood. It's a can job. We're going to go in there and put the fire out. But we have to know what we're going in there to do, and that's up to the officers to be empowered to make those decisions. And they have to be making the proper decisions. If they're not, as Chris said earlier, we have to take them aside and educate them. We have to raise their level of consciousness and make sure that they understand what their job is.
Yeah, and the reality is what you were just saying about with the fast food joints. Like a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of those fast food places don't even insure their buildings. They just insure the equipment, so they don't even care about the building. If it's unoccupied and there's no life hazard, yeah, I think it's a very valid point. I know for us, we do very similar to like what NFPA does. You put it on a revision cycle so that every 2 to 3 years we're looking back at these documents. And how ours really works is we send it out to the end users, the people out in the field every day who are going to be the ones affected the most by these operations manuals. And we base upon the comments and things that they see. Are we relevant? Do we need to change certain things? Or certain things look really good on paper, but in reality they just don't work on the fire ground? I mean, I wish we got more comments to that, but you know how firefighters are. I mean, they're going to do the hard work no matter what, which we love them for. But and I'll give you a perfect example where this worked out well for us. When Slicers and Recio VS all came out, and that whole when Eddie penned that article about it, Eddie and I both together serve on the NFPA 1400 committee, and I recognize what we had put into 1410 and what Eddie had penned with Dan was really relevant, but did what he wrote in that article, did it match what we needed in Fairfax County? I didn't think so. And so we took this back to our collective group in Northern Virginia, and that's where we kind of devised this plan, is that Slicers we thought was excellent for the first arriving officer when he takes his lap. Execute Slicers as you're taking that lap. Look for the fire, identify where it is, identify where the flow path is, make sure you're not crawling down the exhaust, make sure you identify where the intake is, and then with your experience, your judgment, determine where's the best place for you to hit this fire. If it's 6 turns, you have 3 people on the engine, it's an advanced fire, the whole compartment's off, maybe it's best to hit it from outside. But if it's 1 turn, you got 4 guys, you can make the push, it's half a room, great. So Slicers worked out really good for us to institute in Northern Virginia and put into the manuals, and then we took Recio and said, hey, that's a great command level tactical checklist for our command officers to go through. For the chief, maybe not. But for us, if I'm delayed, I'm coming from somewhere else, I'm stuck in traffic, I might tell the 3rd arriving engine officer, take command until I get there. And now this guy has to go from a tactical level thought of stretching the 3rd line, going over a ladder, to suddenly I just told him, hey, you know what, I need you now to switch from tactics to strategy and then run this fire. So if he can have his Recio BS, he say, all right, wait a minute, do I get primary search done? All right, do I have a line stretched on the fire? Do I know where the fire is? Do I got confined to the occupancy? Great. He's got all the things taken care of because now he has that burden of being in charge of the fire ground until I arrive. So that wouldn't have happened if we didn't have that revision cycle to do exactly what you're saying. And look at it and say, all right, let's adopt it. What's out there new? What can we incorporate? What were we doing that's not working that we can now change and keep it on that 3-year cycle of constantly changing it around and around? And maybe sometimes we don't have to change anything. We just have to update some things. but at least you're getting some eyes on it. And for us, you know, we have essentially 19 agencies underneath that umbrella with 25 people who are they're subject matter experts from that group coming to give their input. And so we can devise a document that will work across that spectrum. But that key is, you're right. I mean, you got to keep it relevant. You got to have that judicial review essentially to go back and look at it and say, all right, are these relevant to the modern day environment we're dealing with? And one person can't make that decision. That's going to be really the input from the end users who are out there every day executing on the fireground.
I think that's a great point. We also have a question here from our friend Bill Carey. How much input from firefighters and company officers goes into the SOPs, and who's writing your assignments, and does this change? Well, first off, the firefighters and officers are the end users. They are the people who are following the SOPs. They are stretching the hose lines. They are VEISing the building. They are throwing the ladders. They are being the RIT team. They are being the water resources officer, making sure we have a positive hydrant supply. So the input from these people is huge, I think, because if it's not working on a fire ground, I mean, if it's not working inside the building, the chief is outside being the incident commander. If it's not working inside, it's real important that the people on the inside have input into this. And who's writing your assignments, and does that change? Who's writing our assignments is we put together a team of people from every rank, from the firefighter's rank, lieutenant's rank, captain's rank, battalion chief. We put them all together and we empower them to come up with this document, to go through it, and to go out and research, talk to people, go from an area of a slower area in certain parts of the city to the busiest area in the center of the worst ghetto in the city of New York, and put them together and put the SOPs as we update them. We change them, and they do change. They change over the ventilation. They change over certain things happening. They change over some things happening with fire progression and things like that. So the writing of our assignments is everyone is writing the assignments. It is a group effort, and if you don't like what's written, you can write what we call an L1, a letterhead, up the chain of command, and pass that up the chain of command to the chief of operations about, you know what, I don't like this. And they'll review it, and they'll come through, and sometimes they'll come back and talk to you about it. And if you write enough of these, what will probably happen is you'll get put on a committee so you can start working on them and working together.
Mike, this is Chris. Some of the things that we were able to do is in 1997, when I took my first captain's test, we had one SOG. It was for a mailbox fire because we had to. It was a federal mail, and we had to have a process for it. Because of FDIC and some of the people that we got to meet in FDIC West, we took on a whole task of writing SOGs, and now we have books, volumes of books, and SOGs for engine, ladder, and technical rescue. To the point of the review, that became the most important piece because we saw our SOGs evolve from the very first basic SOGs that we had to a more complex fireground SOG that we have today, where some things that were that are givens today weren't back then when we started with the initial SOG. In the review process, when we talk about subject matter experts a lot, and that term gets thrown around not only the fire service but all parts of industry. It's the credibility of the subject matter experts that we really weigh in on. And having gone through the first SOGs and the writing of them in my agency, now the people that are more in charge of writing them, and I'm more looking at the review side of them, they apply to be a member of the community that they want to be part of, if it's engine or ladder or technical rescue. And then we also have a group we call the Dream Crushers, that are retired guys that come in and let you know why we do something, because some things don't change. And not that the fire works really change, but we ladder a fire escape the same way in the alley that we have to over 100 years. Because if something comes down the alley with a car, they want to wipe out the ladder.
Okay.
There's these little nuances that we don't want to lose the sport to do. So we have a committee that's involved with some of the retired guys sit on the committee to bring back that historical piece to why you do something. And then if there's a larger discussion, it's happy to do it. And we've been a little successful with that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, folks, we're at 1:56 now, so we're going to have to wrap up. So, Dan, I would like to closing comments from Dan, and thank you very much for being here.
Sure. Hey, it's always an honor. Congrats to you, Mike, for the hosting job. Excellent job. I couldn't think of a better way to spend my lunch hours with you guys. Look, I mean, as I said in the beginning, is that having SOGs, SOPs, operations manuals brings some order to the chaos we call the fire ground. And the perfect example is when you do have a mayday. If you have structure in place, we know that what traps firefighters is going to be the byproducts of fire, so they're going to have a problem with air and they need water on the fire. And if you have that operational manual and have that template in place, then people will continue to fight fire, and then you have a team that's dedicated to the rescue. And hopefully when we put the fire out, we can rescue our own. So in the worst case scenario, you already have our purpose of saving our own is already identified. So having, and there's multiple examples, so having that order to the chaos, not only creates that, but also creates some legacy documents so that you can tap into those experienced people who only have a short time in this fire service and get that knowledge on the paper to share that information. So it really is a win-win for all fire departments. And again, thank you, Chief Alt, Fire Engineering, Mike, for having me. Always a pleasure.
Chris, closing thoughts.
I'd just like to start out by thanking you, Mike, for hosting this and let's be a part of this. It was nice to meet you. Thanks for having me. I will say that SOGs are so important to our agency. I was able to come into a fire late in the game and know what needed to be done and where I fit into the program because of our SOGs. And we have a firefighter that's going to be in the burn unit now for 2 more days. But, he was saved, he was rescued because I believe he was doing this, so of the SOGs we have in place. So,
well, thank you for being here, and please, when you see the brother, give him all of our best. Tell him we are all thinking of him and saying a prayer for him. Chief Alton.
Well, I've got to say it was a great conversation. Chris, thank you for joining us. Dan, as always, great to hear from you guys. Mike, thank you for taking over the role as the new host of the Fireground with Bill Guston. I'm looking forward to hearing you guys into the future. Just a quick reminder to everybody, FDIC is only about 90 days away. Classes are filling up, especially in the hot classes. Workshops are still pretty good, but things like advanced extrication, urban essentials, the NIST burns, the bailout class, the live fire training class, the truck class. Several classes already have several sessions that are sold out or near selling out. So going to be a record-breaking crowd, probably going to be well over 35,000 firefighters there. So please, register today. Get your stuff in there and get to FDIC. So some great stuff happening there. Looking forward to seeing folks there. Remember the 5K fun run is up. So if you want to run with Mike Dugan and his new knee, he'll be doing the Bionic Man thing out there this year with us. So please come and register for the 5K. Stop, drop, rock, and roll. Of course, the stair climb, we're waiting for the registration link to come. As soon as that comes, that'll be open. So a lot of great things, as always. Fool's Bash, Union Party, a lot of great stuff going on, as well as 200 classes, 80 workshops, and 21 hands-on training classes. Over 590 instructors from literally all over the world. So I was talking to Lars Angersan. There's going to be a special meeting of international instructors. There's an international instructors training group. It's having a special meeting on Tuesday night. You may want to attend, and they'll be doing functions throughout the week. So just a great, exciting time to be part of FDIC International, and hopefully we get to see you all there. And thank you so much for joining with us today.
Well, I want to thank you, Chief Alton, for allowing me to host this with my good friend Bill Guston. And our next one will be February 11th at 1 p.m. We are going to be talking about the phenomenon of large, under construction, lightweight constructed buildings catching fire throughout the country. And what's going on with these buildings and how this is going to impact operations throughout the area. They've had them in Texas quite a few times recently. They've had them in LA, and we're going to be talking about this. I'd like to thank my guests again, Chris Costamagna, Dan Shaw, and Chief Halton for joining us. Thank you all. Thank Fire Engineering for sponsoring this, and we will talk to you on February 11th when I will be with my good friend Bill Gustin. Thank you all, and be safe out there.